Nardo,
Here.
Mr. Winchell,
Here.
Mr. Lindner.
Here.
Thank you.
1.02 is the approval of the agenda. I would like to make a motion that the Finance and Operation Committee approves the Finance and Operation Committee agenda with an amendment. This amendment is to change item 3.11, changing the Erie County Technical School resolution. This change will be for the Finance and Operation Committee to recommend the Erie County Technical School project resolution.
Sure.
And we are
Right.
doing this
Goodbye.
as a requirement because this project is due for bid and a result prior to the end of the month. And we need to get this answer to the technical school in a timely fashion. Mr. Senate, do I need to read through the entire?
You do not. We'll do that at the time we address it.
I'd like to bring that forward as a motion to change the agenda.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That being said, I'd like to bring the amended agenda forward to the board as a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Item 2.01, the Finance and Operation Committee meeting minutes of August 9th, 2021. I'd like to bring those forward for approval as a motion.
So moved, Gary.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. This evening, we have 11 action items. Mr. O'Toole, if you would like to start us off on item 3.01.
Thank you, Mr. Linder. 3.01 is a resolution that was drafted in order to eliminate the interest or the penalty, the 10% penalty for real estate taxes collected in November and December. If you recall, we discussed this in August as an informational item at our committee meeting, and this was the resolution to bring forward as a result of that.
Thank you. I would like to bring this item forward as a motion as its own, since it has to do with the taxes. So I'd like to put it forward as a motion. May I have a second?
Second.
that.
John.
Any discussion on that topic?
I just want to thank Aaron and the office for reviewing this opportunity. I know last year we did that during COVID, and still, I think it's the right thing to do at this point. So appreciate that.
Hearing no further discussion, I'd like to take a vote on this. All those in favor say, like to take a vote to bring this to the board meeting for the 27th of the month. All in favor of bringing it forward, say aye.
Aye.
3.02 is a second step SEL for adults. Well, would you like to speak about this one? And then I think I can give you a little break for a few moments.
Absolutely. So 3.02 is the second step. It's a 5-year contract for social and emotional learning for adults. If we recall back in that same meeting in August, Dr. Joe Jablonski actually gave us a presentation in regards to the importance of SEL for adults, and he had the data supporting that at that point in time. This is the agreement or the quote for a 5-year cost associated with this program.
Thank you. I would like to go on and talk about a couple other of the next items, and then I'll bring this forward as a block with the rest for discussion.
Sounds good.
So item 3.03 is a Title I service agreement with Erie City School District. This is the final allocation for costs associated with Title I services provided by the Erie School District for 11 Mill Creek Township students. And this agreement was previously approved on 9/28 of 2020. Item 3.04 is a preliminary Title I service agreement with Fort LaBeouf School District for 21-22. This is a letter of agreement between the two districts to provide Title I services for 4 Mill Creek Township students for the academic year 21-22. Item 3.05 is a preliminary Title I service agreement with the Erie City School District. This is a contract between the Erie School District and the Mill Creek Township School District to provide Title I services for 7 Mill Creek Township students for 21-22. Item 3.06 is the accounts payable report for August and payroll for the period of August 27th. 3.07 is the Mill Creek Township School District Activity Account Officers for 21-22. This is updated for the account officers for this current month. And 3.08 is Mill Creek Education Foundation's grant awards. The MEF awarded $7,170 in grants for the August grant cycle. They awarded $2,000 for the Free Enterprise Club Startup at McDowell, $970 for Math Stackers at Grandview Elementary, $850 for the yearbook camera equipment at MIHS, $1,500 for the Action-Based Learning Professional Development at Bell Valley Elementary, $750 for the Safe, Organized, Accepting, and Respectful Initiative at Grandview, and $1,100 for the marching band supplies at McDowell. I would like to make a motion to bring this block forward to the September 27th board meeting. Can I have a second?
Second, Gary.
Any discussion on any of these in the block? I do have a couple questions. Mr. O'Toole, the SEL Second Step program is going to be funded with ESSER's funds.
That's correct.
That this is a 5-year contract. How is that going to work?
So we're going to fund the first 3 years of that through ESSER's funds, and then the remaining 2 years, given the fact that it's after 2024, will be funded through our professional development budget.
And this is a voluntary program for staff. They can opt in and opt out at their will.
That is correct.
That's all I have. So, any other discussion on those topics? Hearing none. All those in favor to move forward to the board meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm going to take the next 3 items individually, as they are big topic items, and I can expect some discussion. Mr. O'Toole, would you like to, or Mr. Gallagher, if you'd like to talk about item 3.09? This is the HRLC architect agreement for the baseball and softball field study.
Yeah, so after the last meeting, I think it was in August, we talked about me getting some quotes, some proposals in order to do a study to determine the best location and some cost estimates for the baseball and softball field. So this is an agreement or a proposal that we're recommending to bring forward in order to perform that study. I was only able to get 2 proposals. The other proposal cost was $32,800, and HRLC's cost was $19,850. And then the third one, I was trying to get Doll Camper, but it didn't work out. They didn't call back. So these are the 2. The options we were looking at, just to sort of go through that, I have that in the description there, but it's to construct a baseball and softball field at Hanlon Complex, which we had already done those construction documents before, but this would be looking back at the code requirements, making sure we're still good with that, and then ultimately seeing through the study whether that one makes sense over the other 2 options or not. Option 2 is construct a baseball field at Mill Creek Learning Center and still do the softball field at Hanlon Complex. Option 3 is to construct a baseball field at Walnut Creek and softball field at Hanlon Complex. And then option number 4 is to look at a multi-purpose field at Walnut Creek specifically. That could be a combination of softball, baseball, or maybe doing them back-to-back and doing a football field or something like that where you put the softball and baseball on either side. And then looking at cost estimates for site lighting. And then if we wanted to go the route of deducting from doing actual turf to doing a sod surface, that would be included as part of the study. So this was the proposal that's there. I think that was everything that we had discussed before as far as options and what we want to see at the end of the study. So by the end of the study, they'll give us a recommendation, or really they'll give the pros and cons of every site with cost estimates, and then we make a decision if we want to move forward with going full construction documents for one of those sites.
What's the time estimate?
As far as getting it completed, the study?
Yeah.
I should have, I didn't look into that a whole lot. We do, as part of this, want to do a couple of investigation at all 3 sites, which would require a subcontractor. They don't do it themselves. So they do an infiltration test. So we would push them along as quickly as possible, but we also don't want to rush it. So it would be getting that stuff scheduled and going from there. But I know we're kind of in
You say they do core samples.
yeah, they'll do core samples as well. And then,
Are we
they-
sure,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Are we sure all those core samples are covered here, no matter what they need? Seems like we get in one of these things, there's also something that
So
need
he,
to do at a later
he
date.
called it an infiltration test, and I assume that's a core sample test. But he said that's all you would need. And honestly, Chris Coughlin with HRLC was saying, in his opinion, he would recommend you do that first, because you may rule out 1 or 2 sites immediately. And then at that point, he was willing to even credit back some of the fee if he didn't have to do a full design. Say the learning center comes back and the soil's no good, he would then come back and say, hey, you didn't pass this test, it's not worth moving forward with the full study.
And he would also look at grades for, where's the stormwater going, or
Yes.
sewer.
Yeah, and he's going to work with Mike
Restaurant.
Sanford again, who already went through the township with our last design at the Hanlon complex. And then, like I said, they would re-review Hanlon and do all of that stuff.
At the other location.
Yes.
Similar to that.
Yeah.
Will they also do any renovation estimates? Will Chris do that too? At each of the sites, there's
Yeah.
something there now, can have to be renovated.
Yeah, he's going to look at everything that would be required.
All right.
Yep.
Is there any reason to ask, especially up on the creek area there, for putting something else? Oh, I'm sorry. Or relocating something that's there now for future use? I'm thinking up there.
If we displace a field up there, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if there's something there now, right? So do we want that capability somewhere else? Is that something to think about, or is that?
Well, I tell you what, Chris is very flexible with all of this. And so I think the idea at Walnut Creek, correct me if I'm wrong, is to use the larger field. That was the site we were looking at, which, to be honest, Chris's first opinion was that's your best bet. You could do a multi-purpose there, or you could just do a baseball field. Are you talking about possibly moving that elsewhere?
The need to move it elsewhere. Put it that way.
Oh, okay.
I'm not
Okay.
sure that it does or doesn't need moved, but that's a consideration. We ought to think about it anyway.
I think overall, if you're talking about the MYA fields that are currently sitting in
Yeah,
the creek.
yeah.
So I think if that is the proposed location, that's when we would start those discussions with MYAA in terms of finding an alternative solution for those smaller fields where a lot of our property is more suitable. Because most of our property currently, we don't have enough acreage in order to have a full entire baseball field, but we would be able to address smaller fields.
Would we owe them that capability?
I don't believe so. I'd work with Attorney Senate to really look at our lease that we currently have there. But I do think it would be in the best interest of the community at whole to at least look at it before we make that determination. So we would be discussing that in further detail with the board at a later date, should Walnut Creek be the destination.
Those are some of the hard discussions that we probably should get ahead of time before we start the process.
Agreed.
Okay.
Well, and I guess with the study, the idea in my mind is to get some of that information so that then we can keep moving through what all this means if we do this site or that site. So that'll all be answered as part of this.
And I'm sorry. As far as the electric, they'll look at what's out there, whether it's enough service and how much the service is. Would
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah, he included that as part of it, so.
Okay.
I know we've gotten a little ahead of ourselves here because we full on into discussion, and Attorney Senate, thank you for letting us organically have that conversation, but I would like to get us back on track and make a motion to bring this item forward to the board at the end of the month. I have a second for that.
Second.
And then continuing that discussion that we've had on this subject. Obviously, there's going to be all the necessary water retention, code reviews, all that's going to be captured to say, here's what our estimated total cost of construction should for each scenario.
Yes.
So Mike, realistically, by the time you go out and do everything, really looking at probably 23 season, you ready to go? Or late 22?
I think before we were talking like 8 months. Yeah, I would say if we approve this at the end of the month, and the study goes well, and then we make decisions relatively quickly, I would say 8 to 10 months, we'd be able to get it actually done.
Yeah.
And then obviously if we do the turf, then, you know, as soon as it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
If we do something else, now you got a little bit more time with sod or grass.
Yeah. Okay.
How do we get the ball moving with funding? How do we get some either corporate funding or other donors that would be interested in contributing to this? Because if we wait until March or April, then it's going to be too late. Mr. O'Toole.
I can discuss funding a little bit further. So, you're speaking on behalf of sponsorships or advertising. We could start to work out an advertising campaign in the meantime, but I mean, that's going to be immaterial in the in the relationship of the overall cost. Specifically, as the next item that we're talking about, we do have some people that are interested in providing some support, some donations, but I'm not. I'll have to create that dialogue with the coaches in terms of what the interest would be for a baseball or softball field donation in relative to those areas. But we do have advertising. I know that they currently sell it. From a booster club standpoint, we could discuss, can we expand upon that? But really from a funding standpoint, you're looking at two areas. Is the bond issue that we already provided, well, three areas. The second bond issue that we anticipate going out and issuing, or our capital projects fund. So those are your three major areas.
I'm thinking more of corporate sponsors or private donors that want to donate a lot of money. The advertising after the fact, you're right. It's just a drop in the bucket to the overall cost.
Yeah, most of that advertising budget, the boosters like to get that to fund their projects too. Uniforms, travel.
I think primarily what Mr. Dean's suggesting is, are we looking at donors for naming rights? Are we looking at opportunities for specific enhancements related to a private donor or an individual or corporation? And how are we, or the coaches, how is the district trying to identify those to see if that is a potential opportunity?
We're at the infinite stages of that. We've already established a structure in terms of what that would look like. The one big piece of that is, I mean, donors are a different story as compared to naming rights. Your naming rights, I mean, you're really talking about foot traffic, right? In terms of what that would look like. And we need to kind of put together the numbers of what the Hanlon complex as a whole, what that volume is as compared to with Gus Anderson Field. We have a general idea from our gate receipts or our participation. So that being a community complex is more appealing, but yet again, it's more difficult to provide a quantitative number for it. So we are in the infinite stages of trying to put that together in terms of a more larger fundraising push.
There's significant foot traffic at the MYA fields up there, as well as regular traffic at the old Asbury there. So it seems pretty significant. There are hundreds of cars drive by 38th and Asbury every day. I'm one of them.
So we just recently received a call from, well, not recently, months ago, received a call from the township. That traffic that is going from 38th Street, we're not allowed to, by township variance, to advertise or put anything close on those fences facing 38th Street. So that prohibits some of our capabilities of generating additional fundraising. We're really strictly speaking on behalf of what would be visual for those individuals inside the complex itself.
Okay. That limits you significantly.
It does. Which is why those advertising signs that used to be on the fence are no longer there.
Gone, yeah, I saw that.
Any other discussion on this topic?
Nope, just one step forward.
All those in favor of moving it forward to the school board meeting at the end of the month, say aye. Aye. Okay. Our next item is item 3.10. This is HF Lens Company agreement for the McDowell High School renovation engineering services. Embedded in it also are some feasibility studies, and I'll let you speak more to what else is included in this document.
Yes, so going forward, looking at 2023, that's what we're talking about now, is starting to get the design fees set up and starting to work on the construction documents for 2023. So going back to that, we are looking at doing the high school and Tracy. So this is specifically for the high school. And like Mr. Linder said, there's a couple of feasibility studies that got included as part of this proposal. So I guess I'll start out with the fee itself. So it comes out at about 4.2% of the estimated construction cost. Now looking at my numbers for the estimated cost, it comes out to about 3.7%. The reason I bring that up is that's always the question of making sure that we're getting a good price on our proposals. Because we only solicited one proposal for the high school project. And the reason for that is because that number was very appropriate for all of the projects that we've been seeing so far. So just as a reminder, McDowell Intermediate, we went out for 6 proposals there. HF Lens was the lowest at 3.7 or 3.8%. The rest of the 5 companies were all above 4% and included some exclusion or extra cost added after the initial contract was signed. We also have a good working relationship with HF Lens. As everybody knows, we've now done 6 schools with them. And so this would be 2 more added on to that. I will point out that we will be moving, as part of this proposal, we were looking at working with Clark Patterson Lee instead of HRLC Architects. That was the decision that was made. Just it made more sense for a project of this size. They also did a very good presentation on the feasibility study, which I'm going to touch on here in a second. And then that was HF Lens's alternative choice to work with when I asked them. So looking at the proposal cost here, we have the usual scope of work focusing on mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So they gave an estimated cost there, $13 to $15 million for an MEP renovation. That would include adding air conditioning to the high school. We've always talked about doing that, so that's part of this proposal. And then the second part of that is doing a feasibility study to look specifically at certain areas of the high school and actually also the McDowell Intermediate. So this all started because the auditorium currently is not being used. The lighting is old. The lighting is very dim in there. It's not a very usable space. They've used it as storage for quite some time. So as part of this project, we wanted to make sure that was made usable. So it started out as, all right, we'll renovate it and turn it into another auditorium. Well, after you start talking about that and you realize we already have a very nice auditorium down at McDowell Intermediate, putting a bunch of money into the auditorium didn't seem like a great idea. So that sort of snowballed into talking to the high school administrative team, talking to the different architectural firms. And as part of that, we're proposing that we go through a feasibility study to see what we can use that space for. So looking at interactive spaces, expanding some of the spaces of some of our current programs, moving some rooms and programs around. That would all be part of this feasibility study. So there's a cost associated with that embedded as part of this proposal. And then it would also include, if we were to make an option or make a decision to move forward with some of those options as part of that, it would go up to a construction cost of $5 million to be added in as part of the project. So that's also included in here. And then we had an additional, as part of that feasibility study, I was informed that we were going to look at doing a new entrance to Gus Anderson Field, which I'll let Aaron speak to in a minute. That's also included as part of the feasibility study. And then it also includes the construction costs associated with that if we choose an option to $2.5 million to be included as part of that. So I know that's a lot, but all of that is in here. And the main reason for that is just, ideally we would do a study first, and then we would go back, and then we would do a construction. But because of the timeline of where we're at, and we know we're going to do the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing portion of this, because this was what we were slated to do, we felt it was important to keep the entire process moving. We would certainly use the same design team if we moved forward. And then they have language as part of this that if we weren't to move forward with the feasibility study and choose an option, we would pay for the study, and then we would get refunded the fees associated with the $7.5 million for the other two items, which would be the entrance at Gus Anderson Field, and then the $5 million we slated for relocating some curriculum spaces throughout the high school and possibly McDowell Intermediate High School. Questions on that?
So I would like to first start by making a motion to bring this agreement forward to the board meeting at the end of the month. May I have a second?
A second.
And now discussion.
So Aaron, on the, so this money's for this project in the original bond issue?
Yes, that's correct.
And can you go in a little bit more detail about the entrance to Gus?
Yeah, we've actually had a couple of donors who are reached out to us, or they've been working with our coaches, combination, interested in providing some funding to address cosmetic needs to Gus Anderson Field and or the scoreboard, which has kind of sparked a bigger want out of this, which is how can we address those wants, given the fact that our facility isn't up to par to what a lot of the other 6A schools are. A lot of our coaches, as well as booster clubs, would like to be able to see us address that facility and put a little bit into that with fundraising. So as we do have some sponsors that are willing to donate money related to that, we're suggesting that the board approve a study where the district would cover the study cost, to have a general idea of what those cost estimates would be, to give us a goal for fundraising, what we would need to fundraise in order to address those wants.
Aaron, how old is this?
That turf's about 8 years old,
So it's kind of running out of its life too, right?
and we have the funds already. As you might recall, that on an annual basis, the gate receipts, participation fees, portion of investment income are all earmarked annually to replacing those turf fields, both at Hanlon, and we have over $1.5 million in that fund right now. So we already have the money available to replacing the turf.
I'm just saying it's about 8 years old.
It
so
is.
It's got a few years left.
And it's in great shape. We did discuss that a little in further detail. We believe that we could get at least a couple of years, if not longer.
I have an ask, because I do agree that it is in the district's best interest to do the feasibility study for Gus Anderson to set a fundraising goal. But I would appreciate if we could have that as a separate standalone so that it's not mistaken to be part of the overall project. So as we come through for funding for the high school, there's not, in the event that some of us are not here, the true intention of what this was by the board enacting it, we could see clearly that that project was to be fundraised for.
Okay, so that's just for Gus Anderson?
Just for Gus Anderson.
You're good for the feasibility study for the rest of it, for the auditorium and all that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so the feasibility, I'm good with all the feasibility studies in the program that relate to the high school itself and MIHS. I would just ask that we would have a separate standalone feasibility study and cost contract for the football stadium that the district would pay for, because we are the ones projecting the vision of what we want for that stadium, and to give that document for the boosters clubs to fundraise towards.
Would you want the construction fees as part of that or not at this time?
The construction fees would hopefully be funded by the boosters and the donors that would be.
So just a
fundraising.
feasibility study?
Just the
for-
feasibility
Okay.
study for this point, because that's what, we're painting the picture of what we want.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur with that.
And this might be a little into the weeds. I know that the funds for McDowell are definitely going to be part of a new bond issuance, correct?
That's correct. And I'll give an update on that at the end of the month with our board summary, or our board reports, month-end close reports. But yeah, after MIHS and Walnut Creek, which are scheduled to start this upcoming summer, it's really going to be a cash flow between projects because we're going to have multiple projects going in 2 years, two
Where I'm
summers.
going with this, Mr. Toulis, Tracy and McDowell will be theoretically our last two schools to be completed. They're the last in the order.
You have Asbury as well.
Okay, so Asbury's the summer after.
That's correct.
Because what I was going to suggest was that we look at making these facility improvements from the feasibility study as add alternates, which would give us the levers to get the bond target right on the number because it's a $5 million spread. We looked at it in that fashion.
Agreed, and that's
Get to the
part of,
structure, but that's maybe a little further down the pike, but that might be important to identify with our partner at HF Lens that we may pick and choose from these 5 feasibility studies to progress with.
I'll be able to kind of address that a little bit further at our board meeting as well at the end of the month in terms of how to utilize the capital projects fund to be able to give us some flexibility in that second bond issuance. Because again, at this point in time, logistically and the cost of, inflation is with products and materials, for us to predict 4 years, 5 years from now is going to be very, very difficult.
It's kind of why I was targeting those as levers for us to utilize if needed. Any other comments or discussion?
Is this really a 2-year project for all this construction?
For the high school?
Yeah.
No, it won't be a 2-year project.
You
Construction
had
will be phased and
3
start
years.
summer 2025.
2025?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be correct then. Yeah, 2023 through 2025.
Yeah, a couple of years.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Item 3.11 is the Erie County Technical School Project. And do you want to walk us through the technical school project resolution as presented to the district?
Which is the addendum that you have at your place. The resolution that we're asking for approval is for the renovation of the VOTEC building with a building cost of $29.6 million, architect and engineering fees of just under $1.8 million. Fees already paid about just under $700,000, furniture and equipment just under $1.7 million, and a contingency of $2 million. That which brings a grand total of $34.4 million is the resolution for us to move forward at the VOTEC in regards to the VOTEC construction, excuse me. And I refer to Mr. DePlacido in terms of when they would expect that project to start in terms of if the bids are accepted, timeline.
There's can't remember it offhand, but it's going to be starting in the fall. Well, late fall, and 2 years, a 2-year project.
Our allocation of that $34.4 million, again, as we had passed a resolution months ago, that was regards to our max was $9.9 million, and we wanted the capital funding formula changed to state that at a very high level. This is all predicated on the market value, the current existing capital funding outlay. And our percentage is 35.3%, which is $12.1 million.
I would like to make a motion to bring this resolution forward to the board at the committee of the whole meeting immediately following our committee meetings this evening.
I'll second.
Discussion.
So I know, Aaron, we talked many, many times about this project, and John, I know you're the representative, but I know the sticking point was always the formula. And so, John, with this, the formula does not change, correct? Or no intention of changing into the future.
Who knows about the future, but for this purpose, the other boards have not listened to our request to lower the percentage of fees up there from our construction formula to our operating formula.
Correct.
Right. We have made many presentations.
Just some historical information here. Erie County Technical School was formed in 1968, and it has utilized this capital projects funding formula for the past 53 years. And I know that we have made multiple requests to have this formula updated. We have yet to receive a counter proposal of any format from the other 10 districts on our numerous requests here. And to put that in perspective, a few years back, we did request that the operating formula was changed, in which they changed that formula because they recognized that that formula that is 53 years old was not appropriate any longer. And it is my opinion that that formula is not appropriate for the capital project either at this time. We've said that we would fund up to 9.9 million at 35.2%. Should they be willing to change the formula in the future? And we did not get an answer on that. And that is, personally for me, disappointing. And instead, what we got back was a project that now is $2.6 million higher, or $2.2 million, excuse me, higher than what we, as a group, initially vocalized that we were comfortable with. I do recognize that there's a need for improvement at the tech school, and that I support funding a project, but it has to be equitable for the Mill Creek Township School District. And in its current format, I don't believe that it is. I will vote tonight to move it forward so that the entire board has an opportunity. But at this point, I do not believe that if we voted on its merits, that it would make it out of Finance Committee. So that being said, I will defer to my colleagues and then give the whole board an opportunity this evening.
Well, I think the numbers are correct, the dollar numbers. I think we also have to keep in mind that that is partially our school. We own partially the percentage, 30%, whatever's on the deed. And these are our students going up there, about 170 of them, out of 600 or 700 total students. And I think the needs of the building are such that this is, the project is warranted. We all know that this particular bid will be null and void at the 28th of this month, a couple of weeks. If we ever do this again, you can probably realize that the cost is going to go up. And I'm not sure honestly, any percentage decrease on our part will even cover that. Prices are going up. There is a need here to do this work. It cannot be brought out in sections and blocks where we can, do the electric separately than the plumbing or whatever, because of the how it is up there. It's a single building. Once you tear down in a certain area, you have to do the rest of it. That's the way it just has to be. The items within the project are similar to what we're doing in our school. There's 30-year-old equipment in there, and it needs fixed. So while I agree that the numbers may not work to everybody, I do think that this is a project that needs done. And it's not going to get any cheaper. And this is, I don't know how it will work if we don't pass this. I just don't know how, in fact, we would get this any cheaper than we're going to get it today. We've tried our best to make sure that we get a decrease. That didn't work, but we did try. So
I would counter that, John, with two comments. One, I would gladly fund this project if we had a commitment to change the formula moving forward. Just because we tried, I'm not going to kick this can another 30 years down the road for another board to be in the same bind that we're in today. And two, this project can come down. They do not need to add 25% square footage to that building. They need an MEP renovation. We have not expanded any of our buildings as a part of our bond project. We have gone in, we've taken our existing structures, and we have done the MEP renovations to bring those facilities up to scale. If they truly want this project to go, in my mind, they either need to meet us somewhere in the middle, or they need to put it back to the drawing board and just do an MEP and bring the building back. We can get it down. It doesn't have to be this big.
I'll just say that, I know that we keep getting blamed or finger pointed as being the obstructionist in this deal, but we had said many times, we'll go ahead with this project. Just change the formula for the going forward. And it's just hard, that project was 30 million, then 27 million, now 34 million. I mean, there's a lot of money being fluctuated. We came with a solution. We came with a hybrid model that Aaron put together. We came multiple times with, hey, let's work with us. Let's try to provide a solution. And, just said no. And, I believe that this project is needed. This will probably be the last project that, for many, many years. But this is the opportunity to get this changed to a more fair and efficient way for all of our stakeholders, all of our constituents also. So I'm with Mike. We'll move it forward and let the board decide. But I'm not in favor of that.
Just,
move it forward, though.
for the public's interest, I don't know if Attorney Senate could give us the kind of the basis of what we talk about when we say the formula. What actually goes into the formula that's being used now for capital projects?
Right. The articles of operation that were drafted and revised, and the last draft was in 1995. But has in Article 4 a capital outlay and lease amortization rental formula. And it says participating school districts shall share in cost of capital outlay and building rental. Such districts shall share costs proportionate to market value of real estate as released by the State Tax Equalization Board on the preceding June 30th. Non-amortizing rentals shall not be deemed a capital expenditure, but shall be deemed a current expense. And I will defer to Mr. O'Toole in regard to the State Tax Equalization Board formula, or if you need further.
I just want to know what part of the formula, or in response to Aaron, makes this unfair for the Mill Creek School District?
From what we've been discussing is that the difference is you're talking about your market values of the properties within your district in comparison to all the other districts in Erie County. That's where the current formula exists. The argument that we've been making forward is our participation percentage. So that current market value is at 35% and has been declining over the last couple of years. Our participation in the VOTEC itself is roughly 21%. So that difference of paying a 35% share of the renovation as compared to how often we're using it of 21% is what we've been, is the discussion that's been had based on the formula.
So the capital improvement formula is really based on our ability to pay versus the other district's ability to pay.
That's correct. As the state funding formula is articulated for your funding that they're willing to reimburse you, Mill Creek has a much higher market value for which they're able to tax in order to pay that bill.
But the counter to that is other districts get significantly more state funding and federal funding than we do. We rely heavily, as Mr. O'Toole would say, on our local taxes. So 60 to 65% of our budget is our local tax. So we rely on that. Other districts, 30, 25% of their local funding, so they get significantly more funding.
Well, because they get significantly more funding because they don't have the local funding to establish that. If Mill Creek is in a better position, they're going, economically speaking, from that formula, we are going to get less funding from the state and federal government because we have a stronger local base. If another district doesn't have that stronger local base, then the state and the federal give them more funding. So I guess I'm still struggling with how this is unfair. I agree it's different than our participation rate, but if we looked at our ability to pay versus districts who have a lower ability to pay, then how is it unfair?
Don't they get equalized though by giving that additional funding? They get brought up by getting that additional funding, but we still rely on that tax base always to make ends meet.
But when you go to a capital improvement project such as this, It's not that the state and the federal are going to kick more dollars into that district to fund this. They are going to have to come up with the funding themselves by bond issues or whatever. Sure. But we have a stronger ability to do that. So I guess I don't understand the unfairness. I agree with the discrepancy between participation and our ability to pay, but I don't see it as being unfair.
So effectively, we are subsidizing the other districts because we can pay more.
Sure, that's the way the
That's,
world works, I think. There's a higher tax rate for people making more money than people making less money. That's because they have a better ability to pay. I'm just trying to understand, so people out there understand that this funding formula exists because of the reasons that you stated in the formula.
and I'm countering that with formula that was designed 58 years ago. Doesn't hold as much weight as it probably should today. We looked at the operating and we have a variety of, this formula should probably be a mixture of participation and capability of payment. Not just purely who can pay more, pays more, but it's a combination of utilization versus ability. As opposed to just, you can pay more, it's your problem. Doesn't matter how much you use it.
Well, and I would agree, Mr. Linder, that we've had this same discussion over and over and over and over again over the last several months. And we are looked at as the bad guys that won't budge. But really, when we talked about the 9.5 million that we were willing to pay, there was no budging on the other side as far as scaling back the project or making modifications in the project. And really, they are really doing what they're accusing us of doing, of not budging. You know, it's not that we're saying it's not important. It is important to renovate. But what we're saying is the cost is too high, and the burden that we are asking our taxpayers to shoulder is very difficult and needs to be addressed. And really, nothing has changed in this conversation over the last several months.
I have a question. Should I ask now or do I wait for the?
It's open discussion, Mrs. Kaptan. You can ask now, or we can have at it at the committee of the whole meeting as well.
Sure, but go ahead.
Okay, well, the contingency plan, it says it's 2,000?
2 million.
2 million, I'm sorry. What does that mean? Is that a safe number? Like, will this number go up for us when you get into this more than the agreed upon, even though that contingency is in there?
I'm not well versed in the Erie County Tech Plan itself, but what I will tell you is from a contingency plan standpoint, like we, even with our MEP projects, not even adding additions such as this, we do have our own contingency numbers as well for the unforeseen circumstances. As we've discussed, a good example of that is we've discussed what BIU, the inspectors coming in at the last minute and saying, you know, you need to adjust this or I'm not going to allow the building to give you an occupancy permit. I mean, you don't have a choice at that point in time. You have to move forward with that. And it's impossible to ask architects or engineers to be able to understand everything that's happening within the walls. So there could be something that they've missed because they're not fishing through the walls that see the full piece of that. So is 2 million itself too high of a number? I mean, I do think that you're going to need a contingency plan.
Aaron, it's 5.8%.
Okay. Yeah, I would say we use 2%, and we've been coming in at less than that for our projects.
And that number was brought down. All these numbers were a lot higher than they were, and decided to bring them down because they were too high. Is that number firm? No. Hopefully it's going to be a lot less, but it's a contingency.
It is a concerning number, though, at 5.8%. And I would, if Mike was still up here, I'd ask him if he was comfortable with that, knowing that it is new structure coming out of the ground, marrying to an existing 1968 building. Old renovations of that age have a lot of unsuspecting or undiscovered issues in them. And then when you need to build into the ground next to a building, there's a lot of in-the-ground cost that is very variable at that moment. So 5.8 is lower than I would recommend for a project if I was running one in my professional capacity. I would probably be closer to 7.5.
Yeah, I have not looked at the plans, but hearing what I've heard from contractors and these discussions, yeah, it sounds like that building is very old and there's a lot of asbestos in there, I believe. Or not as much. We hope there's not.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
You gotta open up the
Um,
ceiling.
But yeah, Mike's right. When you start building next to another building, that raises another whole level of stuff you could run into.
So what would happen, Attorney Senate, if we agree on a certain amount and it goes over?
Well, this is the amount you agreed to. This
Okay.
is the project cost you're agreeing to. They'd all have to come back to you. They'd have to go back to every board, because that's what every board, except for Mill Creek and Wattsburg, has approved. In addition, the Joint Operating Committee awarded the bids contingent upon every board approving this number. So this number's set as far as the Joint Operating Committee is concerned, and as far as the majority of school boards out there that have already approved the resolution.
But to give you a more definitive answer, if it came in under, as John, or we would like to hope, there would be a return to the individual districts at their percentages. If it came in over, you're not going to leave an unfinished building. Every district is going to have to put the money up because you're not going to have a non-usable structure that you just put $34.5 million into. So whatever the overrun is, it will get signed off on. I've never seen a project stopped after that type of investment.
What is the reason Wattsburg's not, at this point, hasn't committed to it?
I think their meeting is this week.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to ask for a vote from the Finance Committee to move this forward to the Committee of the Whole meeting immediately following the Personnel Committee meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There are no informational items this evening, correct?
That's correct.